for listening to Balanced Black Girl Podcast. My name is Les. I am your host, and I appreciate you tapping in. So if you're new to this show, we talk about the various things that we're balancing in life, but our conversations are really rooted in well-being. A lot of us think of wellness as what we eat or exercise, sleep. Yes, wellness is all of those things, but it's also how we live our day-to-day lives. It's how we pivot. It's how we experience life's different seasons. So I'm really excited to bring you an amazing guest today. Please join me in welcoming Miss Sherrell Dorsey to the show.
Thank you for having me, Les.
I am so happy to have you. I feel like this episode is so long overdue. I've wanted to have you on the show for so long.
Oh my gosh. First of all, I think when I found this podcast, I was like, this was made for me. I have been looking for this for my whole life.
Oh my gosh.
And then when I found out you're from Seattle, I was like, okay, this is divine. All of this is like divine order.
It was meant to be.
But thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. Also, it's wild to me that we, are both from Seattle, but from the same neighborhood. And we just met and just figured this out within the past year.
Hilarious.
How does that happen? Because it's not that big.
It's not that big. And usually most people know each other. Yeah. So just,
Yeah.
Well, it was supposed to happen like this. So
all things in divine timing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're such a dynamic person and you've had such an interesting career and life trajectory. And so for our listeners who are just meeting you, I would love to give them Charelle 101.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Charelle 101 starts in Seattle, right? Starts with my grandfather giving me my very first computer when I was 8 years old. And that is so essential to my story because it really defined why I do what I do and sort of the trajectory that I had. I had the fortunate opportunity of being part of the Technology Access Foundation in Seattle, which trained kids of color, inner city kids on computer programming and languages and how to interview and helping us write our essays for college and getting us internships over the summers. I worked at Microsoft 4 summers in a row in high school. And again, like I said, my grandpa bought me my first computer and my family came from Detroit. So my grandfather moved from Detroit to Seattle in the 60s and worked as an aircraft technician at Boeing. And most Black and brown folks have origin stories of them coming to Seattle for jobs, particularly places like Boeing and other big tech or manufacturing kind of environments. And so that sort of tech component played such a huge role in almost everything. I was able to get a scholarship, go away to school, and in tech and this idea of being able to build something out of nothing stuck with me forever. And then also going into places like Uber and Google Fiber, and then eventually recognizing that, hey, who we're calling genius, who we're calling the innovators. Every single time that someone referenced technology to me, it was about being the next Bill Gates, right? Growing up in Seattle, that was kind of an easy association. Or it was, hey, by this time, especially post-college, it was the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. And then, of course, as Tesla was getting major, it was the Elon Musks of the world. Well, the challenge for me is that not only did my grandfather buy me my first computer, he helped us put it together. He helped me build my robotic arm for my 7th grade science fair project. My grandfather did not have a high school education, but he could explain every single intricacy of any technology, anything, and wired his home and had streaming security cameras at his house, in the early 90s that he pulled together himself. A literal genius that just did not have the opportunity or was born during a time where opportunity was provided. And so I wanted to rewrite that narrative and really demonstrate and start to document what does Black genius look like. And so that made me launch a newsletter called The Plug. And I just started talking about Black people in tech, Black invention, and just telling the story of my story, diving into this and creating articles and stories for the Black enterprises of the world, covering Black women in AI at Essence, interviewing folks like Steve Case, who founded AOL, for folks like Fast Company, and really bringing all that thread together and deciding I want to create the Black Bloomberg. And that's what The Plug emerged into. And then 7 years later, after a tremendous run, we were actually the first Black tech news publication to syndicate on the Bloomberg terminal, which I sometimes take in pride, but then also it's a travesty in this country. Was able to sell the publication. And as much as I really loved every step of my journey, it was not an easy one all the time. And after that sale, I really had to reconsider, what is the life that I built? Who do I want to be? What is my identity now? And what are the things that I missed as a result of like girl bossing it so hard? So that's Sherrell 101 with a little extra sprinkle, because I got to be a little extra. But yeah, that's the gist.
Okay, now we got to go into 201 and we got to get deeper on so many.
yes.
There were so many aspects of your story that I really loved and I want to dig into more. I loved what you said about Black genius, because I think for so many of us, we had similar experiences with our grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles being the most innovative, creative people who that just wasn't seen because they didn't have the opportunities that we have, or they didn't necessarily have the same outlets that we had. And it makes me want to redefine genius in a way, because as you said, we tend to look to these figures who have been really good at making a lot of money. But at the end of the day, innovation is about solving problems. And I think Black people are expert problem solvers because we've had to be, and really highlighting that and recognizing kind of the genius in all of us and the ways that we've had to solve problems and innovate is really important.
It so is. And I love just that kind of first line of what you said of, there's been these figureheads that have made a lot of money, and we don't think about also what kind of harm as well, right? We kind of consider it all good because, especially in America, like we associate, wealth and making money with genius, with knowing, with having answers to problems. And I think that it has led us astray, particularly in a society that suffers from so many needs. And I just immediately thought about like Auntie Monica's hair salon. Like I grew up like, yes, twice a week, I was at the Technology Access Foundation in the Central District, which was the hood back then. And it was a storefront, and like, you want to go across the street to the corner store, like you had to talk to the gentlemen who were standing outside on the corner and like ensure that like you had safe passage into the grocery store, or into the corner store, before going back to finish your programming class. And I think so much about just the environment. I think about Auntie Monica's hair salon. So I'm going to computer class twice a week. And then on the weekends, like I'm sweeping up hair, like I'm helping with clients. Like I'm learning customer service skills. I'm learning business skills. I'm learning, how to customer retention, right? And marketing from this Black-owned business that still operates today and has, at least for the last 30 to 40 years, has served a community of people that have historically been underlooked, underserved, has hired young girls like who I was, as a teenager who needed a part-time job and needed to be able to just easily hop the bus, take the 42 down to Rainier, take the 7 over there to Cloverdale and like walk up the hill. Because Seattle got a bunch of hills for those who are unfamiliar. There's so many hills. There's so many hills. I was so in shape. Like I was so in shape. I didn't have to work out. I just had to like walk the hills.
Yeah.
But like, I think about the significance of the business owner, the community person. I think about Trish Malines-Zico, who created the Technology Access Foundation. Like she was a retired Microsoft software engineer, Black woman who was like, I'm like the only person in this position that I know. And I've been working in tech for so long. Like I need to teach kids of color like this or they're going to be left behind. And 25, 26 years later, like created a full-fledged school that my cousins went through, educates teachers of color on STEM skills, and is like in her corner of the world, like took this one idea and said like, you guys deserve to be a part of this. So when I think genius and I think Black genius, I think community, even though we have been left out in so many ways, we're still being left out, right? And it's like, I can be really, really serious about this because it is significant, because we are in an age of artificial intelligence. We're in an age where folks have, especially communities of color, Black and brown communities, we've over-indexed in service-related industries and jobs. And so at the end of the day, like it is dire, but what we have to remember is that our communities are assets. And I don't know about you, but when I look at the ways in which we've heralded essentially like these white guys in tech, like everyone's been telling us like our asset is only by what we're able to produce from a technological perspective. But we have so many assets within our communities. And so within the plug and highlighting and covering our communities in a smart way, in a data-driven way, to show not just like we exist, but here's like here's the business strategy. Here's the actual like material value that's being added. In addition to that, like I wrote a book called Upper Hand, The Future of Work for the Rest of Us. I tell my grandfather's story, but more important, I'm like, y'all, here are the cheat codes. Here's how you get into this space with or without a college degree. Because most folks are not going to sit down and have that conversation. But I think narrative, it not only has to change, I think that we have to just recognize what those assets look like in our communities and to value them and to go back into those spaces and environments and say, hey, okay, I learned this. Like now let's take, let's not have your like regular appointment book calendar on Auntie Monica. Like, let's get you set up on Squarespace or what have you, so that your business runs a little smoother and we can operate it more efficiently and it can grow greater. And maybe we can get some contacts or connections with the city who is always looking for ways to employ youth and will even provide a subsidy for you to hire 5 or 6 more people that want an opportunity and want to learn this particular business. And so I think that like just looking holistically at Black communities, there's so many areas of opportunity to empower and to elevate and to recognize everyone's genius in different forms and functions so that we can like create, I think this kind of new-ish economy. That's like my sense of like utopia of what it could be. But that narrative for me and shaping that in a significant way, not from an entertainment perspective, because I think we get a lot of like these business conversations or these like viral moments of Black folks talking business. And sometimes it comes across more of like performative entertainment versus don't just tell me that you were able to like, run up, some numbers, just flipping stuff. Like, show me the strategy behind how you created a lit bar, right? And you took on private equity. Like, what was that process like? What even is private equity, right? How do I do this? Or, okay, yeah, like you bought a house and then you bought another one and then you rented it out. Like, how did you manage that property management process? How did you leverage the tax abatements in your area? And really, really dive in and break things apart. And talk about invention, right? And so for me, it was just like, how do we slow the internet down and give people like true storytelling, give people like true tactics, give people true, just more than just like the junk food and get rich quick, but more of like, how do we think holistically? How do we think as a community? How do we think laterally?
Absolutely. And how do we create ecosystems that can benefit more people,
exactly.
bring more people along? Yeah. I loved what you just shared about just those conversations around how we do things, lifting up the hood a little bit. And it also relates to a bit of your story. I would love to talk a little bit more about selling businesses, because I think that is kind of a hot topic where when we see announcements of Black-owned businesses, getting acquired or being sold, oftentimes it's met with disappointment. And I understand that because there's also been examples of like beloved businesses that we had getting acquired and then they change and then the products don't serve us or it's not like it used to be. However, I think just being more of a business girly, I tend to celebrate those things because I see the possibility there. And I'm like, great, now they can distribute more. Now they can help more people. Now it can be more accessible. But I think that those conversations aren't often had where people just say, oh, it just is sold out. It's this.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you having your company acquired?
Yeah. So I've sold 2 businesses. So I sold a tech hub that I created with some business partners in Charlotte that was hyper focused on supporting Black folks in tech in Charlotte. Clearly, I'm very Black. I like doing Black things, right? And so for me, the acquisition really came at a time where I felt like I brought my company to as far as I could bring it. And it is an asset. And, even though like you have this process of some aspects of the business shut down, there's kind of this lifelong archive of the body of work that was created. And I think that when we kind of look at, there's a lot that goes into building something from nothing and from scratch. And when you are building a company, I think a lot of times, and I don't know about you, but like, I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. Like I was always the only entrepreneur in my family. I was always like on a kind of like the black sheep. Like I think just a couple of years ago, my family was like, oh, you're not going to end up homeless and broke. Like, okay,
we get it now.
Yeah, we kind of get it. Because before they're just like, why would you not just stay at Microsoft and just work there for the rest of your life? And I don't know, like just die. And, at least you're like financially secure. Right. Because I come from households where it's like, you work for the same company for 30, 40 years and then you retire, right? And especially I think for Black folks, like that was a solid plan, right? You got your good benefits, you've worked for the government, what have you. And so I think that we sort of sometimes think so long term of like, this business should be around for 100 plus years or what have you. And you have to decide as an entrepreneur, is this the one of many that you plan to create? Because I have about 10 to 15 business ideas every year of things that I want to do. And so I don't necessarily go into things believing I'm going to have this for the rest of my life and my kids kids are going to work here. Absolutely not. I'm a 0 to 1 founder. I want to create it. I want to build it. I want to build things that don't exist. I want to fill a gap. And then once that gap has been filled and there's some prominence and the body of work is significant, and it has changed the course of the conversation, well, then it's now time for me to go find out, like, what is the next conversation to be had? What's the next mode of liberation? And I know that I can put this in safe hands so that it continues to add value into the world and it's still accessible. But I don't necessarily have to be the ringleader anymore. And now I can have support and I can have more of a team. And so I totally agree with your point that like, I always get excited when I see that people have sold. And I think, most recently, like Menta Cosmetics.
Yes. KJ. I love KJ.
I've never met KJ, but I have been a Menta girly for a while. I try to go mostly Black owned and particularly Black women owned cosmetics brand as often as possible. And I look at the opportunity that happens when expansion can happen. And the reality is, we also have to look, I'm a data girl, so we got to look at the data. We can't only sell to Black people, right? We can't only rely on Black dollars. We have to strengthen the pot so that the pot can turn over, welcome other people into the pot, and they turn over, and they can welcome other people. It's almost like evangelizing to an extent. Like, So if you want this pot to get bigger, you have to have more bodies, more numbers, more people working on things. And I think that you can sell in a way that still keeps the integrity of your business and the integrity of your mission, because you get to design that. You get to say no. You get to say, hey, here are my stipulations, right? You get to have that negotiation when you're doing a merger, you're doing an acquisition, and saying like, no, like this needs to stay at the heart of this particular brand. And so, I think that we just have to be a little bit more open-minded about the possibilities. Like, I love that you have these folks who have sold their companies and they've been able to invest in and pour into other entrepreneurs. They've been able to purchase other kinds of businesses, legacy businesses and companies in order to stand them up. So yeah, you can have like full ownership over a $10 million business, or you can sell that joint, take $100 million, and now go invest in and pour into another 100 businesses that now have the potential to grow and to stretch and then rinse and repeat. And I think that we have to understand that this is America, and that's how wealth is created. And that's how others who don't look like us have traditionally created wealth and created vehicles. We have an emotional relationship to our businesses. And for good reason. We care about them. We invest in them. We love on people. Like, I used to love going to the salon because it was more than just you going to get your hair done, chilling with your mom or, what have you. Me and my godsister, our godmom used to take us to the hair salon. It was like, we all became family, right? Like, no matter where our stylist went, we became family. It was graduations. It was whatever major life events. There was a celebration. There was gifting. There was love. There was rides to the store. There was tragedy. There were flowers sent, right? And I think that like we love that closeness. And at the same time, we cannot be emotional about these businesses. And I tell my friends all the time, and even when I've had hard days, you know, in entrepreneurship, where you're like, I should just give up. This is too much. Or I don't know how to make payroll this week. Like, you know, I don't know how this invoice is going to get paid, or this invoice did not get paid from a client, you know, and you just get weary. And you just have to sit back and realize, like, I can build it all again. All of this shit can burn to the ground, and I can build all this again because I built it before. And so part of it is like detaching, which is like a word I've learned in like the last year, but like is detaching from the outcome and hyper focusing on why are you here in the first place? Right. And I'll tell you this because this is such a Seattle story. So, you know, Catfish Corner.
Yes.
So in Seattle, like Catfish Corner, like there are a couple of Black owned restaurants. There's not as many now, but Catfish Corner was like a staple in the Central District. And the Central District was a traditionally red line community just for Black folks, Asian folks, Native folks. So a lot of Black families, especially as they came up from the South, were in the Central District. So Catfish Corner is this amazing family-owned business. And as you can imagine, they sell catfish, some other things, but greens, you know, the most amazing fries on the planet. But you could go in and get a great plate for your whole family. And years ago, due to a lot of different issues, taxes, cash flow, just bad business management practices, Catfish Corner closed. And it was a travesty to the community. And well, one of the grandsons was like, not on my watch. Yeah. And went from selling fish on the side of the corner to 2 to 3 different locations when he could, to now a permanent location back in the Central District. And I'm so proud of Charelle, and it's called Jackson's Catfish Corner now. But I look at that as not only did he rebuild a community staple, he made it his own. He was able to leverage technology. He was able to leverage programs within the city to even get the space to bring it back into where its origin started. But I think that like that is just a prime example of you can build all this shit again, and you can build it better, and you have more insight and more information. And when you have community where the community also has a knowledge base to help you be successful, now you can do it in a way that is not based on survival, but on true thriving, true forecasting. Okay, now I can develop some products I can sell in the store. So we got the restaurant, you're going to get, you know, you can come in, order your nuggets, order your hush puppies, order your greens, some peach cobbler on the side, maybe some banana pudding. I'm very hungry right now.
It's lunchtime while we're recording this.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm hungry. But you order all that. And also if you go into the Safeway, maybe you can pick up, you know, the famous tartar sauce. And now you're doing numbers on a whole nother revenue side of the business that maybe your great grandparents or, you know, the kids didn't know how to do before. So I think that like we have to expand our concept of what opportunity looks like. And is it selling out or is it leveling up? So I think that has to be like top of mind.
Absolutely. Is it selling out or is it doing business today? Because that's so different than it was the 90s, the 80s, the 70s. We live in a different world. And so it's moving accordingly.
Yeah. And you can move with integrity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing is I think that we think that like selling out means, you know, sold to the white folks and now you're going to give us trash and you're going to forget about us. And I think that's the part is like, we've seen that before. We've seen the hurt and the damage that can cause. But I think that when you sell and you level up, and now you're like, okay, I can hire more Black models for these campaigns. I get to host more influencers now. I get to provide new kinds of income and opportunity and create a spinoff line or a brand. I think that that's why the storytelling is significant. And that's why I felt like business media was such a disservice for us. Because imagine if we could have covered, because the first person I ever saw this happen to is Lisa Price.
Yeah, Carol's daughter. Yeah.
Because I was like back in the day going to the store in Harlem. Mm-hmm. I remember I was working for, I don't know if you remember Jones Magazine.
I do.
Jones Magazine was that girl. I was an intern for all of like 5 seconds. And my editor couldn't go to this like party with Lisa Price at the Carol's daughter and like Floetry. Everyone is like there. And I remember just standing in this. So I got to go. Like, I remember standing in this space and looking at this beautiful business, gorgeous business, this Black woman created. And just thinking of like, this is the first time I've ever seen something like this. Because we used to go to like the markets and get, the jars of stuff that Black women could cook up in their kitchen. I'd never seen like, the label, the store, the hair salon, the nail salon, like the full-fledged service of operations, multiple locations, selling in other high-end stores. My first time seeing something like that. Could you have imagined if the New York Times, if you had the Wall Street Journal, not just talking about a Black woman in her business, but here are the numbers. Here's the strategy. Like, we might have gotten that story once every couple of years. But could you have imagined if we would have been walked through the particulars of from selling shea butter on the corner into how do you do a multi-lease commercial deal? How do you expand distribution? Where do you go to negotiate factory prices? Where do you go for ingredients? What happens when there's a shortage? What were the components and economics of the deal? Because how many more Lisa Prices could we have made at a more expedient, process? And now we have everybody. I feel like, everybody, I need to start a line like at this point. But that was the business insight that was not being taken seriously. So by the time you're getting into like the Bloomberg terminal, you're getting to these like financial choices that are being made by people who don't look like you, don't come from communities that you come from. Of course, they're going to say, oh, well, like Black people don't do this. Black people don't buy this. Oh, I had no idea Black women are spending billions of dollars on hair care and hair. Like, of course, you get to a table with a venture capitalist and like they don't get it. They're like, this deal is not for me. Of course not, because the reading materials that they're using to stay up on the industry has ignored entire segments of the population. And that's because our journalists have ignored entire segments of the population. When we look at Black business journalists, I'm not talking about sports entertainment. I'm not talking about fashion, but Black business journalists. Now, there's some that are out here killing it. Like, don't get me wrong, but I could count like on both hands who those people are, who get serious beat reporting. And I will guarantee you that none of them get to go into their own communities to cover business and on a serious level.
Yeah.
So when we talk about ecosystem, like cause and effect.
Yeah. And telling the holistic story, not just a watered down version that leaves so much important information out.
Yeah. Because when I was reading, like Black Enterprise as a kid, running home to get that magazine in the mailbox, I was like, oh, like, yeah, I want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know what entrepreneur really was. I just saw people crossing their hands on the cover. And I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to do that. I want to go to the conferences and what have you. And I think Black Enterprise gave us like a lens into that. But I think that as time moved on, as like we transitioned to digital, as like technology became the pinnacle of the way in which not just we work, but the way that we build companies, like there was just an entire missing factor of narrative that if you were not in it on a day-to-day basis, like you could not decode. And I was in privileged spaces attempting to decode. And so I just think that there was so much opportunity that creating the plug, which I did kind of accidentally, it made sense. It made sense. And there's more coverage. There's more opportunity now, but I still think we've got a long way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And as you're going through these acquisitions and kind of like parting ways with things that you built, did you experience any grief during those processes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It took me a really long time to figure out who am I now and also not feel the need to immediately create something to feel like I need to be validated. And I first had a hard time like telling my team, you know, letting my team know that, hey, we're transitioning. That was the hardest part, you know. And I got to a place where it was like, my team needs to get to the next level. I've taken them as far as I can get them. And wanting also to be sensitive and considerate, right? Of like, people got bills to pay, kids to feed, dogs to, you know, I don't know, take to the vet, whatever. And so it was like giving them enough time, you know, to deal with the transition, knowing that like I had to talk to investors, like, hey, this wasn't my original goal, but like, this is fitting for me now. And before you can sell or shut down or what have you, like you don't even get a chance to process. You don't even get a chance to think for yourself about how you're feeling. I remember that being a very dark time for me, like a very dark time. In some cases, you may feel like, well, I failed because I didn't hit this number, or I'm selling for this number when I really wanted this number. And because all of the examples, again, we go back to Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, right? So you're thinking, oh, I have to sell for X dollars. I had a conversation like that with an entrepreneur here as well, who, you know, they didn't hit their goal, but they still had an incredible exit. And I'm like, yo, what is our like proxy, right? Like, why can't this still be seen as successful? But when you've built your whole identity on like, I'm doing this with such intention and with such mission, it becomes part of like why you wake up in the morning. It becomes part of why you're on planes more than you see your family, right? It becomes part of like why you can't show up well in your relationships, because you're like, I'm trying to build something, to build something real dope. Like, this is bigger than me. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, after that sell, it's like, I had to shut off my email. I had to shut off like my phone. I did not respond to people for a while. I went to the Bahamas and I was like, I'm gonna just be with the turtles. And I was just with the turtles.
That sounds amazing.
It was amazing.
So healing.
It was amazing, but it was also hard. Like, I hit a really interesting depression during that time. And I didn't really realize I was depressed until I kind of got out of it a little bit, you know, and I think a lot of Black women too, like a lot of us are high functioning depressed people. Like,
and those symptoms tend to like manifest differently in us, which is why we're often not diagnosed or get what we need.
Absolutely. And so I struggled. I struggled with, what is my identity now? Who am I now? Because this is the identity that opened up doors, that had me sitting in certain types of rooms and like having conversations with people who never would have like looked twice at me walking down the street. It gave me a sense of power, gave me a sense of control. And even after, you know, making the announcement, it was like the phone calls, the inquiries that I received, as well, with people like offering me, you know, well, can you come over here with us, or can you consult here, or what have you? Like, I'm so grateful that I didn't have to really do much to, you know, keep my life going. Like, because if I would have had to immediately, I would have failed. It was like everything else was just inbound. And I needed that. Like, I feel like it was just divine that like I got a year to just rest and consider and to recover and to rethink and to like reset my goals. And then I think I eventually, maybe 6 months in, I finally like opened my email back up. And it was this outpouring of love and appreciation. And it was this outpouring of like text messages I had to respond to. Folks who were just like, yo, like, you know, X amount of years ago, like you mentioned us in the plug, and like, we got a check from that. I did a staycation at this like hotel here in Atlanta. And as I like was checking out, I had this DM, and the kid from valet was like, I thought I recognized you. And I'm sorry, I don't even know why I'm tearing up. I have told this story a million times. I've never teared up. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like infinitely blessed, because sometimes you don't know the impact and you don't know why you do the work that you do And this kid at DM me, he's like, I thought I recognized you. He's like, I got my cloud certificate because of you. Like I followed you and I read your book and like I started getting into cloud certification. It's just like young kid. I'm like, I wouldn't even think that like you would follow me. Like, I just feel like the old auntie.
It's going to change the course of his life.
It'll change the course of his life.
Yeah.
And I had my friends and my partner at the time were just like, you do not understand like this, how far reaching this work was. Yeah. And so I had to go from like a space of, okay, I didn't hit my goal. I have to let people go. That's hard. I have to have conversations with my investors who surprisingly were like, you did so incredibly well. Like, we are so proud of you. And like, whatever you need, whatever you build next, like, let us know. So there were all of these like affirming things that came next. But at the time I couldn't receive it because I was beating myself up for the things that I did not do. And I couldn't see myself beyond like, this is the brand I built. This is what I was supposed to do. And now I'm like giving somebody else my baby. And like, now what do I do with myself? Because now the next thing I build has to be greater and all the pressure, but like also it's really freaking hard to build something from the ground up. And like, no one sees the unfairness in meetings. No one sees like just advertising is a shit show. It's a shit show. And then you show up as a Black media publication and, all of the scars and the stories of like being disrespected, being ghosted, being sent through hoops, being told to be grateful for the peanuts a company offers you, and knowing good and damn well that they have provided far more for far fewer requirements to others. And so I just, and so it was that like that feeling of like, I want to build the next thing, but like, I have to do this so differently.
Yeah.
Because I cannot sacrifice myself. I can't sacrifice my key relationships in order to build something. And like, I can't accept some of the things that I accepted in the beginning because I felt like I had to. So yeah, I mean, I tell you this like with all transparency, like I'm still on a healing journey post that acquisition. Like I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so fortunate. I showed myself that I'm capable, that I'm worthy, that I add value to the world. And like, I was able to love on people through my work. I was able to highlight people who were never considered or got shine. I was able to connect people to money and resources. There's folks who still DM me now who are like, yo, I just got out of prison. And like, I'm hosting this hackathon. So I'm trying to introduce kids to tech. And like, it's insane. It's insane. All the things that I thought I would do in my life, like this was the thing that was like, okay, but it's still an ongoing healing journey because I'm still learning the lessons and I'm still, realizing like there were some amazing parts and there were also some things that like would break your heart, and it's like, where do you put that? What do you do with it?
Because you still have it. It's still in your body. You still carry it. It has to go somewhere.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, I'm so grateful to be able to tell more of that story publicly and especially like on your platform here and I think that's why I gravitated towards this platform because I felt like there's so much honesty and transparency. And a lot of times like we are holding things in because we're told we have to be strong and like suck it up and in business and, and it's like, well, yeah, there were some great things. There were some dope things. There were some once in a lifetime things, but also there's a whole bunch of shit that I'm still trying to sort through.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that that's a great kind of pivot to more so where you are now. And something that you had talked about in Sherrell 101 was like girl bossing really close to the sun, which I think also for people our age, I feel like we were kind of set up as like girls who grew up in the 90s and entered our careers in the 2010s in the decade of the girl boss. Like we were kind of set up in some ways. And you are now in a space where you are approaching work and life very differently. You talk a lot about simplifying the hustle and finding senses of ease and creating your own version of a beautiful life. And so now that you're a couple of years past that big transition, how is that manifesting for you now?
Yeah, I realize like I'm always going to be a high achiever. That's just how I was built. I always want to create incredible things in the world. So I didn't want to just be in this space of like, I'm just going to give up and join a commune and go like kumbaya and like
I think about it often.
Yeah, at least like once a month. I'm like, yeah. If I just moved to Barcelona today, well, you wouldn't miss me. But I recognize that we have every tool at our disposal to do this much more simpler. I built the plug hard. Like I built it hard. I did everything. I did all the things because I had to at the time. Or I didn't have the clout or the resources or the network. And so now it's like, I get to be so thoughtful about how I design my life and allow my work to be a part of that, but not the main component. I get to decide how I want my relationships to flourish, how I want my health to look, how I want my life to feel, in addition to, all right, I'm gonna build this, this, and this. And so I had always used to tell myself, especially when I would get overwhelmed with like a business decision or I just have a lot of things to do on my plate. And I'm like, Sherrell, it's simple. Like it was a way for me to calm down like my brain and the overwhelm. And I just started telling myself, like, you just got to simplify the hustle. Like the hustle is always there, right? And I mean, that was sort of the great components of the girl boss. It was like, it gave you the confidence to say like, I can do it. I can be whatever and all I can be, be all you can be. And it's like, I don't want to be all I can be. I just want to be for this moment right here. And so for me, it was like, okay, if I were to do anything again, if I were to continue this path of like, I am here for a reason. God put me on this planet for a reason. I have a purpose to fulfill. Well, how do I do this in a way that it doesn't destroy me and doesn't take away from me? And so for me, it was simplicity is more than just like about productivity. It really is a continuous audit of how can I make things simpler for myself? Maybe I get my groceries delivered. Maybe I say no to this particular project. Maybe I I move a deadline for 6 months because I know that I'm dealing with a lot, right? Or I know that there's going to be some major family transitions. Or like, 2020 was a rough year for all of us. My biological father passed away. I had 3 or 4 team members within a 3-month span lose either parents or a close loved one. I remember my attorney, like it was just back to back to back to back. And I'm like, the girl boss movement told us how to win and work, but no one told us how to live. And then when life happens, how do you girl boss when you are grieving and you're trying to figure out how to get to a funeral that you can't attend because of COVID? Like, how do you girl boss if you have a miscarriage? Like, but you're expected to like show up and just put lip gloss on? Like, how do you girl boss when your city is being destroyed? Like, I feel like there's so many things that were left out of like what truly happens in life around like building a life. Like if we're only building our life around work, like that is some sad shit. That is sad. And none of it added or increased our value at all. Like at all, as much as we sacrificed for that narrative, like none of it, I feel like changed the way that the world saw us. And so I think now for me, it's like, simplify the hustle. And I have this 21-day guide around balancing ease and work because it's like, we got bills to pay. I got student loans, like I didn't go to Seattle U like I should have. Like I got student loans, out of state student loans. So it's like, okay, yeah, we still have to build wealth. We still have to take care of our responsibilities. And that's great. And we still need to fulfill the mission that we're set out on earth to fulfill. But every day, like I want to be intentional about what I remove from my plate. I want to be intentional about how I think about my work. And whether that is like, I'm going to take this call and I'm going to go for a walk. Like I'm going to be walking on a call. I have had major clients. I have been on, Zoom. And they just see me outside walking. And they're like, oh, we should get out and walk too. And I'm like, yes, you should. Sitting at your house. Like, let's all go for a walk. Yeah. Let's just turn this into a weekly walking meeting. And it's just that level of simplicity of like changing the way that I think capitalist structures and this insane desire that we have to be successful at all costs. It's like, well, we actually get to decide how we do this now. And I want to build and get to the finish line with so much ease and so much grace and so much energy and excitement. Like, I don't want to get there like bloody, bruised, and sweating and barely alive.
Yeah, you can't enjoy anything.
You can't enjoy
what you build.
You can't enjoy it. And then how are you supposed to inspire the next generation if you're saying like, listen, you just got to keep fighting, all your life you have to fight. Like, I mean, that's not sexy. Like, no one wants that. Right. But like, but if I want to build a beautiful life for myself, if I want to build a beautiful life that others can feel safe in and others can feel seen in, while like the money's doing what the money does, like that to me is like inspirational. Like, that's how I want to hustle, So for me, and I think it took me this last year to really redefine like, no, I want to build dope shit. I'm gonna keep building dope shit, but I want to do it in the most simplest, intentional, and conscious way possible.
I love that. I love it so much. Something that I think a lot about when it comes to like productivity. For so long, I defined it as doing more. And now I define it as how much space can I create?
Exactly.
The more space I can create, the more productive I am. And that usually means doing less things and having more space for living and seeing work as a part of life instead of all of life and everything else gets in where it fits in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that's the way, again, it was all positioned to us, right? It was all pitched to us in that manner. It was do more, do more, spend less, do more. And it's just like, more is not more all the time. Sometimes more is just chaos.
Oh yeah.
Because we don't have hobbies. Like,
right.
It's just more shit to do versus like, why am I? It's that consciousness of why am I? And I think that that's where like the world of travel opens up like so much. And you realize like this Western way of thinking and moving is not the end all be all, right? Like, how can you be productive and still like you said, like create that space for the things that you actually enjoy and to live a full life? And I had to step back a couple of times. Like I had one of my cousins, I was like probably at like at a family event, maybe it was like a graduation or something. And we're sitting next to each other and he's just like, yeah, well, I wanted to like reach out to you about this, but I figured you were busy and what have you. And I was like, wait, like, why do you feel like you can't contact me? Like your family starts to see like you're doing well. It's a weird relationship. I don't know if this like happened for you, but that relationship kind of changes and they start to feel like you're unapproachable. Yeah. And I'm like, call me anytime, text me anytime. If I'm in a meeting, I'll call you back.
Yep, exactly.
And I realized like, but Sherrell, did you create that space for them to feel seen, to feel heard? Like, how do they know that you love them? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you show up? And I realized like, I don't want anyone in my life that's close to me to ever feel like I'm inaccessible to them. Or that I am so busy and I'm so high and mighty and all these kinds of things that like, they don't get to receive from me. And I think that really knocked me back into this space of like, what are we doing all this for?
Right.
What are we doing all this for? For more stuff? And I like stuff. Like, don't get me wrong. I like stuff. I'll be loving stuff. But I also want to be able to invite people into my orbit to enjoy my stuff because I want to share my stuff. And I want them to enjoy the stuff and I want to buy them stuff too.
And experience things together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like pouring into my mentees, like being able to like send my mentee to like her first Alvin Ailey concert, and so I think about like that whole concept of space, like creating space. And sometimes you just need space to get a grip. Like I just need space to lay in my bed and eat Cheetos. And like, and scroll Twitter. Like that's the space that I may need. I may need that little half an hour or an hour, and I need that space just to let my mind just reset a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, the great thing too is that I think that we've been attempted to be so prescriptive to how everyone should live their life. And the reality is like, the way you want to live your life is going to be very different from me. I be watching your stories, girl. I'm like, she is on it with her gym schedule and her protein pancakes. And I'm like, I may not be going that hard. And that's perfectly fine. But like, you get to decide what does productive less look like toward moving towards your goals and the life that you want to live. And so even in this idea of simplifying the hustle, it's not a one size fits all approach because we all have different lives. We all have different goals. We all have different dreams. We all have different needs, just even sometimes on a medical level. And so there's less around just the tools. Yes, use the robots to your advantage. Automate what you can, leverage your ChatGPT to help you write that email and create that proposal. Like take some stuff off your plate so that it can be simple. But the tools in and of themselves are not the point. It's about how are we consciously making choices for our lives that are not being determined by some advertisement or someone telling you this is what you have to do if you want to be great. Because most of the people that are great in the world did not follow the rules.
Right.
Most people that are great in the world, they didn't know what they were doing. They were just like, I'm going to just do this and this is how we gonna have alcohol. And so it's like, make your own rules. Everything is made up. And once I kind of determined that,
everything is made up.
Everything is made up.
Yeah.
So it's like, why?
And
why are we following
so much messaging around how we should live or what we're supposed to do. As I get older, I find myself pushing back on that. I'm like, who created that and who is benefiting from me believing this very narrow thing? It's that often not, we're often not the ones benefiting from staying within these tiny little systems or worldviews that are designed to keep us small.
And some of them were designed to keep us safe. And that's what I realized too, that some of the advice that we've gotten from our families, it's not that it was bad advice. It was just, everything was designed to protect us. And unfortunately, like as Black people in this country, like we have had to have certain behaviors in America in order to keep ourselves safe, right? If we wanted to avoid being killed, right? Like my mom had that conversation with my little brother on prom night when, he's driving the Mercedes and she's like, okay, this is what happens when you get pulled over, right? Like there are some rules that were set up in a society that was designed to be unequal and discriminatory, right? There are some rules for women that we had to follow in order to keep ourselves safe. And I think now it's like, it's being able to contrast. And I think going back to your point of like, who does this benefit? And understanding like, okay, there are some things that I get to choose to color outside of the lines on. I get to choose for myself. And on top of like, holding on to wisdom, because wisdom is significant and important and it does keep us alive.
Yes.
But also, yes, like if this is not benefiting the life that I want to live and the kind of joy that I desire to have, maybe I need to rethink this.
I love that mindset. Something that you share a lot about, which I love every time you say it, is my life is beautiful.
Yeah.
And can we talk a little bit more about how you are currently stepping into a beautiful life, what that means to you, why you affirm that?
Les, I love that you mentioned that. I was thinking a lot today just about how hard the world is, how devastating the world can be. All of the wars, all of the corruption, all of the awful things that are happening across everything. And realizing that every day I get to get out of bed is a gift. And for some reason, guys, like, get up, girl. I don't know if you follow Frank in the City. I love you, Frank in the City.
No, I will.
Frank in the City is my favorite person because he has this whole thing where he is like screaming, get about that bed, girl. Get about that bed. Like, you got a chance to get up today. You better get up on out that bed, come hit your goals and be grateful for this day. And like his voice is just in my head in the mornings. And I'm just like, I gotta be grateful because somebody didn't wake up today. I gotta be grateful because somebody woke up and their entire city, their entire lineage was destroyed. And I need to get up and honor them. And I'll get up and I light a candle and I write in my journal and I say, you know what? The world sucks sometimes and it breaks your heart. but I'm going to design beauty in my day. I'm going to find the miracle in the day. I'm going to find the beauty in the day. It might just be going to get my little $20, flower set, from the local grocery store. It might be just sending a text message to my mom, who I'm so grateful for. And it might just be making myself a beautiful breakfast and sitting and making myself a cup of tea. But I get to decide that my life is beautiful. I get to decide every day what that looks like for me. And I probably just got into affirmations maybe the last year and a half. And I recognize that when I move with that mindset, I notice the beauty. I notice that I notice in my inner self, I want to give beauty to the world. I want to treat someone a little better. I want to bless somebody's day, and I love living in the South because everybody's like, hey, baby, what you doing? You need some, it's so nice. It's kind of easier. I think if I was in New York, I'd be like, oh, get out of my way. But I say it kind of as a protest to all the ugliness, because it's easy to complain and to talk about what you don't have. And, Black women can't raise this and and all these things, especially in business and in tech. And it's yeah, those things may be true. And I look at data all the time, but my life today is beautiful. This minute, this moment is beautiful. This water that I get to drink, this is beautiful. My life is beautiful because I say that it is. And I think the more that I have incorporated that into my life, I realize I'm so much more intentional.
Yeah. And it primes your brain to look for the beauty. When you start with that lens, to your point, you do start to see it everywhere, just in little things, because that's what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
I think so many of us are embracing ease and softness in new ways. And I'm just so excited to see where that takes us.
It feels good. Yeah. It feels good. Yeah. It feels loving, and it feels beautiful.
Yeah. So for our audience, if they want to learn how to simplify the hustle, they want to peek into your brain, your tips and tricks, how can they learn from you?
So you just got to go to SherrellDorsey.com.
Perfect.
And you can, /simplify the hustle, or it's just right there. And I would love for your audience to also just subscribe to my newsletter, because I'd like to share a lot of my story and tips there as well. And I want to continue to build a community around this idea of let's stay ambitious, but let's build beautiful lives.
Yeah. It's so needed. We'll make sure that we have your newsletter and the guide linked in the show notes to make it super easy. Helps so many people. And I want as many of the girlies to get their hands on it as possible.
I love that. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you so much for joining me and just for sharing and letting us into your world.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Please make sure that you're subscribed. If you're not already, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, so that you can get these conversations every Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.